Hi, everybody. My name is Alicia Jay. I am the Managing Director for a project called the Survivor's Agenda. I'm very, very happy to be on with all of you. I am outside in the New York City area, so it is 3 p.m. in the afternoon for me. So good afternoon for people on Eastern Standard Time. And earlier in the afternoon if you're on Pacific time. So thank you all for tuning in today. I am so excited to talk to all of you about the Survivor's Agenda project, and even more excited to be in conversation about what all of your Survivor's Agenda are. As we get started, I would love to just kind of start with a collective breath. So for those of you that are on video, feel free to close your eyes. For those of you that are not on video, again, just kind of start to find a comfortable position. And we're gonna do 3 collective breaths in unison. So inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, and make this the deepest one. Inhale and exhale. Great. Thank you all for helping to arrive in this space. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Survivor's Agenda project is, and then say more about how we're going to be spending the next roughly 90 minutes together. So the Survivor's Agenda is a project that originated with 4 anchor groups: Me Too International, Justice for Migrant Women, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and the National Women's Law Center. Since then, it has expanded to a steering committee of 21 organizations and a community partner list of over 60 organizations. And the purpose is to create an agenda that describes the asks and demands of survivors across the country. So we are going to be publicly launching an actual agenda, right? A platform at the end of September at our Survivors Summit, which you are all now officially invited to participate in and register for. And the project is focused on 3 main things. We are here to deeply listen to survivors of gender-based and sexual violence. We are here to continue to strengthen the movement of folks that are doing work around an advocacy around survivor leadership. And we are here to make our demands known. You know, it has been 2.5 years since the Me Too movement broke through, and yet survivors are not considered a political constituency. So what do we mean by that? That elected officials and candidates who are running to represent our communities are also accountable and responsible to the needs of survivors. So we follow a mantra that there is healing in action and action in healing. So part of the action process, right, taking political action, is acknowledging that the role that healing plays in transformational change. That in fact, none of us can sort of fully step into our power in a political way unless healing is an active part of that work. And also acknowledging that part of the healing process is joining in community to make change, to feel less alone, and to actively work to end harm. So again, we practice the philosophy of healing in action and action in healing. And so what we're going to do today is all of you are actually going to become part of the agenda creation process. So we have a couple of different ways that we are inviting the voices of survivors into the process of telling us their demands. We have a survey on our website at survivorsagenda.org. So please take that after this call. We have town halls. We are doing national calls through the month of August. And then at the end of September, again, we have our Survivors Summit, where we will launch the agenda. And the last piece is we are doing something called kitchen table conversations, which are opportunities to engage in small group conversations with your community, friends, family, to talk about what healing is, to talk about what does a world look like without sexual violence, to what does it mean to feel safe at your school, in your workplace, in your community. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this conversation today. So I'm going to share my screen just so we can talk through the agenda and what we're going to be doing today. So let me get that up and running. Okay. So, welcome. We are going to be doing a little bit of a group brainstorm around that question that I just lifted up. What does a world look like without sexual violence? And then we're going to go into breakouts. And this is the part where all of your voices become paramount to what this agenda will say. And I'll say more about what those breakouts will look like, but just sort of get ready to be in conversation with one another about your agenda. And then we're going to bring it all back to the group to debrief and hear from one another and send everybody off with some asks. So first, I want to just review the group agreements that we are going to bring into this space. To respect others and yourself. What's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here. To listen with active curiosity. To pause and get curious when you are feeling triggered about what is going on inside you that needs attention. And to take care of your body in this space and do what you need to stay present. In this sort of increasingly virtual world, we can't ignore our physical presence and physical space. So again, please do what you need to do to take care of yourself during this conversation. And now I'm going to bring us back into the group because I really want to put out this question for our initial group brainstorm to get our juices flowing on this Monday afternoon. So the question to all of you to share in the chat or to raise your hand is, what does a world look like without sexual violence? A world free from gender-based violence. What does that world look like to you? And again, please start entering in your answers in the chat or raise your hand. And I think we can unmute everyone if you do want to sort of give a shout out. Really curious your vision. Already we have someone saying no victim blaming. That's great. Mandated consent education, being able to go for a walk at night. Yeah, that's huge. Being able to do recreational events, feeling safe. No gender roles, where power imbalances are mitigated and managed intersectionally. Equality and respect. I'll add in some more questions in case this continues to spark something. What does a world free from sexual violence smell like? What does it sound like? You know, sort of really start to embody and envision what that world would be. People acknowledging that we are oppressed and privileged, drastic reductions in domestic violence and prison populations. This is an incredible array. survivors are believed and actually see justice. Being loved and embraced. Yeah. Yeah, the ways that we'd be able to care for one another, or the ways in which our care for one another would help to create this world free from sexual violence. Great. Not worrying what others think of our experiences, having a voice and being heard. I mean, this is the world I certainly want to live in. I know that our trauma is acknowledged and seen. This is great. So we are going to take this energy into small breakout groups. And what you all will be talking through in groups of, I'll sort of aim for 4 or 5 people to keep it small, will directly feed into the actual writing of our agenda. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to the directions for the small groups. And our ask is that there is a note taker in each group. And let me tell you why this is extra important. The note taker in each group will then, there is a form linked in the directions where you can record and submit the conversation that you all are having, so that when we go back to write the agenda with our team of steering committee members and community partners, your answers will feed directly into this platform that we are creating on behalf of survivors across the country. So please take a look at the directions document. And I'm going to open it up if anyone has questions before we go into small groups. You can see in the directions document, there are 2 main questions that we're talking through. One is, what does healing mean to you? And the second one is, what systems need to change to end sexual violence? And you'll see some questions underneath that to kind of help prompt. So let me ask if there are any questions before we get into breakouts. And I will also say, there is no need to turn on your camera to have this conversation if you don't feel comfortable. And of course, I invite you all to do so if you want to. This is really, you know, again, take care of yourself however you need to. So I'm not seeing any questions right now. So I'm going to just one more time reshare the link to the directions for the breakouts. And then we're going to go into small groups. If you have any questions or any issues in the small groups, there is a way to sort of flag the facilitator, and then I can come and join you. So I'm going to facilitate that right now. And then when you see on your screen a link or a pop-up to join your small group, just click on that, and we will plan to come back in 30 minutes. So at my time, it will be 3:50. For those on the West Coast, it will be 12:50. So here we go. For the folks who are still in this main room, have you gotten an invitation or a pop-up to join a breakout group? Sylvia, it looks like we still have some folks that are trying to connect to audio, so I'm not sure what that means for breakouts. I think you're on mute if you're talking.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hey everyone, this is Sylvia with It's On Us. Yeah, are folks having a hard time unmuting themselves or unmuting their video? If you are, feel free to message me directly and I can help you out with that, but you should be able to unmute yourself. We updated the settings. If you don't have access to a microphone or a camera, that's totally fine. And feel free to just listen in. You can also use the chat function in the breakout rooms if that's easier.
Sylvia?
Hi, I am here.
Hi. Is the Survivors Center still happening, or is that finished?
Yes, it is still happening. There is our host, Alicia. We are currently in a breakout activity, so that is why it is awkwardly silent.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. I was in the beginning, and then I received a phone call, but I'm back now, so I'm definitely glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Hi,
Definitely. Hi.
like to be placed in a breakout group. We have about 20 more minutes of this conversation, or you can kind of hang out and kind of come all back and do a little bit of reporting out. So you're also welcome to just hang out here and then listen in on that portion. It's completely up to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. If possible, I would love to be placed in one of the breakout groups.
Great, I'll do that now.
Thanks.
To anyone who has just joined as well, feel free to message either of us about being put into a breakout room if you would like to.
Hey, Allison, I will add you in. Yeah, great. And Leilani, so we are doing a breakout group activity right now, a conversation around that will directly feed into the writing of the Survivors Agenda project. And so we are doing breakout groups for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll come back into the large group. So totally your choice, whether you want to join a room or whether you want to hang out here and then listen in on the report back. And Allison, just to clarify, were you already in a breakout group, or you want me to add you to one sort of randomly? Okay, you weren't. Okay, great. Then I'll add you to one now. Hi all. Welcome back. We're just gonna wait for everybody to come back into our main room and then we're gonna debrief. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. For those of you that joined late, I will just say a little bit about the Survivors Agenda project, and then we will talk more about what came up in your breakout groups. So the Survivors Agenda, we are literally creating an agenda from spending the summer talking to survivors across the country, creating a platform of our asks and demands. We believe very strongly that survivors should be the ones shaping the national conversation on sexual violence. And so the conversations that you all just had in your breakout groups will feed directly into the actual agenda that is written and presented publicly at our Survivors Summit on September 24th through 26th. So thank you all for the note takers who recorded the conversations. And now I'd love to talk more and debrief about what came up in your groups. And again, anything that was just shared or anything that is shared moving forward will be directly a part of how we craft this agenda. So the first question is, what does healing mean to you? And if you feel comfortable coming off camera and sharing your answer with all of us, or you can certainly type in the chat, would love to hear a few sentences about what healing means to you. If you had any aha moments during your conversation, or what might be coming up for you as a question moving forward. As you think about that, I will share that we've already had 800 survivors fill out our survey online on survivorsagenda.org, and I will invite all of you to take that survey as well. And everyone is also answering the same question: what does healing mean to you? So would love to hear from folks if you'd like to share. And you should all be able to unmute yourselves if you want to jump in.
We said getting justice, whatever that means to the specific survivor.
Absolutely. April, I'm curious if in your conversation, you sort of talked any more about what justice means to all of you.
I didn't really go deeply into that. I think that it kind of looks different to everybody. So for some people that means criminal justice. For some it means on campus, getting their abuser off campus. For some it's just being believed, I think. So I think it could look like a lot of different things.
Absolutely. Great, thank you for sharing. And it's interesting to think about healing in the context of justice, in that, what if your definition of justice isn't possible or isn't coming to fruition? What does it look like to try and heal or be in a healing journey, sort of without those needs being met? It's incredibly complex.
Absolutely. It gets complicated.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So what healing means to you: forgiving the evil for the sake of yourself, right? The role of forgiveness. Who else wants to be brave and share a little bit about what healing means to you, or what you talked about in your group?
in my group, Miss J, we talked more about the systems that need to change in terms of the school system, criminal justice system, and the healthcare system. In terms of the criminal justice system, maybe having a victim offender program, have him or her just sort of be more apologetic, or just have a goal to look for, to aspire to while incarcerated, so then they won't be more inclined to just stay there locked in the cage and then come out and reoffend again. And also, I do believe that in the school system, K through 12, and especially in the police department and healthcare department, to have intensive, and when I mean intensive, I mean at least once a week, or at least one whole week straight out of the month, just 5 hours a week out of each month, to just have some sexual assault training courses and the intersectional identities of it, because realistically speaking, it's always the statistics 1 in 3, 4, 5, 6, and every 6 minutes or 3 minutes or 90 seconds. So if we could all address it and sort of have it, just have 5 hours out of each week to address it, then people would definitely be more inclined to come forward to have an actual designated time, because there's really no good time to talk about being assaulted. Like being assaulted during December, late December, or Hawaii is basically the worst thing, because Christmas in Hawaii, Hanukkah in Hawaii are basically happy places, and just weekly classes will definitely help in terms of justice and coming forward.
Thank you for sharing. Rose is sharing, surviving is being able to move on in life holistically with quality of life, not only surviving the incident. Thank you. So let's bridge into debriefing our second question. What systems need to change to end sexual violence? Some of the prompts that were lifted up are: what needs to change in schools so that everyone can learn safely? What needs to change within the healthcare system to ensure that everyone can access services safely and without discrimination? What needs to change in policing and in our criminal justice system to create justice and healing? What community-based alternatives to the criminal justice system would meet the needs of survivors? So I'm curious, what came up in your conversations? What was an aha moment for you, or a question that you're going to be taking with you? None of these are simple answers. They're all incredibly complicated. People are coming from very different perspectives. So would love to hear some thoughts on what you talked about.
I was a late joiner to the meeting, but I was in a meeting with a group with April, and I'm hoping I'm saying Kirstyn's name right. And they offered, so I work at a high school, and they offered the importance of making sure that there are advocates around. So as a counselor, being able to bring the advocacy to our students who have been assaulted and have that support built in, which I'm not sure a lot of schools have. I know my school could definitely use some more of that support. So they opened my eyes to the importance of having additional support on campus for our students. And I look forward to talking to both of them a little more and finding out more from them.
That's great. Do either of those folks want to share what those supports on campus should look like?
Erin, really close. My name's Kirstyn, but thanks. But it was really close.
Kirstyn, thanks.
Yeah. So I talked to Erin about how I am prevention education for our Rape Crisis Center. And so I suggested that she get in contact with any of the local crisis centers to have advocates there in case a student discloses or needs to make a parent phone call. What I do though is I go to junior highs and high schools in our area, and we talk about consent education and healthy dating relationships. And so I think education was a big theme that came up across the board with this one, was not only education like we're doing right now for students, but also across the board as far as like school officials and criminal justice and healthcare professionals, education not only about what sexual assault is, but also trauma-informed policies and procedures that they could be taking when they have to come in contact with survivors.
Great.
I wanted to add that at our college, we had from Victims Resource Center a sexual assault advocate who did come to our school one day a week and would be there for our students and did education and training to our staff and faculty on these issues. The problems we had over the last few years is that position seems they can't retain them, I think because of salary. So that position was always turned over the next year, and we had lapse in services because they didn't have someone new to fill it. So I think even just, making a priority to really value in salary if possible, to keep like those who are investing so much in doing that work in those positions, so you have a constant person, to work with those institutions.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, hello, my name is Victoria, and I just wanted to add more to this conversation because I'm a student advocate myself, and I go to Prairie View A&M University. So what we do is we're necessarily a confidential source, but we all go out and we all like host events and training for professors and students and whoever else is in need of like help, counseling. Those that are on campus, they can also seek us. So we are able to go out and like advocate and give information, and also we're a confidential source. So whenever a victim or a survivor comes and they want to tell us what's going on, or if they want to report an incident or anything, we won't share any information or anything like that.
Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So again, what systems need to change to end sexual violence? Already hearing from folks that are doing the work, serving as advocates, doing the work of prevention on campuses in high schools. So what systems need to change? Either in education, in the workplace, in communities. What would you put on your survivors' agenda?
I think it's important for law enforcement to be trained in trauma-informed interviewing. That is something that one of our law enforcement agencies in my community has done, and then we have other law enforcement agencies that have not. But I also think we have not seen our prosecution do that. So we do have an ASART, an adult sexual assault response team that does meet monthly to review cases. And our prosecutor was talking about how our domestic violence sexual assault victim showed up in like stilettos and really victim shaming her. And it was just really upsetting to see that. And it was just, how do we combat that if our female district attorney is also upholding those views and isn't going to be able to really combat that in her jury if she's doing the same thing to the victim? And until we can do that within our prosecution, I don't know how we can actually do that within the whole system. So I do think either a transformative justice, restorative justice process is also something that I would like to try to move forward within our community, but I don't know if I can do that within our community. Unfortunately, I'm in a conservative part of Colorado, and I just don't know what that really looks like. So I think it's important that we look at those alternatives as well.
Thank you, Courtney. I think, the conversation that you're bringing up is, really at the forefront of the national conversation right now, right? What does it mean to defund law enforcement? What does it mean to reinvest in communities? How do we do that in a way that keeps survivors safe, if that's the goal, right? As you're saying, what do restorative justice and transformative justice processes look like in practice? And I will say that in the midst of doing this survivors agenda work, as I said, we have 800 people that have filled out the survey. We have movement groups that are kind of wrestling with these questions. None of it is easy. And people are really asking big questions about what alternatives to the criminal justice system look like. And there are, a wide array of opinions on what is possible. So that's just to say that I think we're all kind of wrestling through those questions right now. And one of the things that continues to come up, and I'd be curious if folks on this call have an answer to it too, is, who really needs to be accountable to making these system changes happen, right? Sort of who are the actors that it takes to make all of this possible on the local level, the school board level, the community level. So I'll add that question into the mix in addition to this question around systems change. Is anyone on this call in your work exploring transformative justice or restorative justice processes?
I can speak to that. I have a little hybrid of the systems and what I do to try to find my own source of justice. Because we in our group talked about not even bringing assault to the police station because they don't really ever work on behalf of the, those that experience the violence. And so oftentimes it's not even a thought to even report when you get assaulted. I'm a storyteller, so I think that where I've really found justice is on the stage and telling my story. And I think that a big piece of healing is taking hold of that narrative and being able to transform the narrative and reframe it. And I really believe that within society, we need to dismantle these narratives that encourage rape culture. And I found that really in the comedy community, that's a big piece of the puzzle, I think, because oftentimes comedians laugh at rape as a joke. The butt of the joke is always the victim, as opposed to using comedy to elevate survivors' voices. So I think that that's a big piece for me that I try to make my agenda.
Thank you for sharing that, Diana. I'm curious because it sounds like this is a lot of the work that you do. It can be complicated, right, to share your story. Sometimes it can feel extractive, can feel like trauma for trauma's sake. I know for myself as a survivor, my story doesn't always feel neat or buttoned up, like I can say it in a few sentences, right? And certainly that feeling ebbs and flows. So I'm curious what you would share around kind of the intersection of survivorhood and storytelling.
It's been very difficult to share it publicly, and if I have to be 100% honest, it was not really a choice to share it. And my life has really taken a trajectory where I have been an actor and a writer my whole life, and I didn't really want to be telling this story ever, but it got to a point where I had to use my skill in comedy and my skill in writing in order to bring about some truths that I didn't see the world at large around me really understanding about the impact of sexual violence on a human. So right now, what I try to do is create conversations around the psychological impact to help people understand. But I think that we can all take hold of the truth of what happened in many different ways, and it doesn't have to be shared publicly if that's not the route anybody wants to go, because it's very difficult to be public, and it's not pretty. It's not a pretty experience.
Thank you for sharing more about your experience. I'm wondering if others on the call want to share anything about the experience of your story, of owning your story, of using it in service of action, or deciding not to.
I've used my story. I was a missionary temporarily in Papua New Guinea, where 50% of women are assaulted within their own homes. And I chose to use my story because it just kind of felt like in that country, in that culture, that men just didn't ever think that there was anything wrong with it. And that was just something that was done. And so being able to share, like, this is what happened to me, and this is what it felt like emotionally in all other ways, and how it's impacted my life. And it was difficult, but it ended up being a very powerful thing because, you know, like a lot of the response that we got was like, I never even thought of that and everything else. In fact, I guess when we left, like, everybody kept talking about it. It got to the governor, it got to the prime minister, and now they're doing stuff about it. So stories can be powerful.
Thank you for sharing that experience. The fact that you're saying that change did come or is beginning to come as a result is certainly powerful, and not always the case.
Unfortunately, no, not always the case. Because now I'm like back home in the States, and you just don't get the same response. You get the victim blaming and all of that. So choose your audience well, I would say. Yeah.
Choose your audience well. That absolutely. Do other folks want to share about the process or impact or recommendations around how to share or how to use one's story towards action and change?
Oh, I actually have an idea.
Great.
Oh, so lately with this whole pandemic situation, it's all about emphasizing on identity politics. And what we really need to do, I believe, is to reach men, especially straight men, because they're the more inclined to victim blame and least inclined to believe. And I believe it's important to mention that people of color, LGBT plus, and men are more likely to be raped than falsely accused, because that's just the main reason why people don't believe survivors. It's like one man can just literally assault hundreds of girls, but one girl lies, and then that shreds the credibility of all women in general. And realistically speaking, it really shuts down male survivors as well. So if you wanted to get a straight man of color to just say rape is wrong, you just tell him that the fact is that people of color are generally more likely to be assaulted and least likely to report. And same goes for the LGBT plus community and disabled people and mentally disabled people, and as well as immigrants as well. And just trying to find a way to relate to this story instead of saying could be your mother or father. Like, what if it was your father? Because more fathers are concerned about their sons being gay than them being raped or turning into therapist. That's just the truth. I mean, yeah, so basically just finding a way to reach men, basically, just to point them into the conversation.
Yeah, I hear you bringing up a really central question that, we're certainly wrestling with in our work, which is, where does the accountability lie in terms of creating change? And certainly, how do we kind of hold that aspect of simultaneity, right? And, when we talk about dismantling a system of white supremacy, we talk about the responsibility of white people to do that work. When we talk about dismantling patriarchy, we talk about the responsibility of cisgender men to do that work. And so, yeah, I appreciate that point. And I'm curious how others in your work or in your personal life are thinking about accountability. Again, who is accountable to making change to create this world free from sexual violence? Do you believe lawmakers, elected officials are part of that?
I think the lawmakers are, but I think also a big problem just in light of all the Epstein and Epstein stuff that's going on now. We see that a lot of those lawmakers are perpetrators too. So are they protecting themselves by not pushing forth legislation because they're afraid of being exposed, or protecting themselves so they can continue to do what they're doing?
Absolutely. Right. For those of us that are organizing around gender-based violence and survivor leadership, the central question is around power, both in interpersonal dynamics and institutional dynamics. Who has the power in this country to legislate and then to enforce that legislation, to move forward the cultural conversation? Thank you, Anne.
I think a lot of it is the media too. We kind of talked about that in my group, just kind of changing the language. It's like I just seen a lot of the Epstein stuff that was like, and he slept with a 15-year-old girl. And I'm like, no, he raped a 15-year-old girl. And so, especially in light of everything that's coming out, changing the vocabulary, how we talk about it, but also, the media will play a crucial role in exposing those politicians and stuff like that, and bringing out the facts of what's going on. But they need to, again, be addressed accurately and not handled with care, like, oh, well, he slept with a young girl. No, say it right.
Thank you for sharing that, Megan. I think this conversation around culture change and narrative change is as integral to a question around systems change as anything else. And for the folks on the call, I'm curious what you have seen push forward a cultural conversation or a narrative shift around language that Megan just brought up, around believing survivors, around believing women. What have you seen actually move forward or create a ripple effect in the zeitgeist?
Oh, well, to add to what Megan said about the narrative, it is very important when the mass shootings, well, they are still happening, but eventually it got to a point where the media changed the narrative for the mass shooters and didn't show their face and didn't center the story around them. And they centered it around the victims. And rape stories, it's always like scholarship athletes committed sexual assault against this intoxicated girl. People are going to focus on her being drunk and him being this well-accomplished student. It's like they share your resume. Oh, this millionaire just raped some girl, and then they're going to think, oh, she's a hoe, oh, she's a hooker. So it's all about saying that, oh, this guy did do this. Well, you can't say did, you have to use allegedly. Or this guy drugged this girl instead of this guy assaulted an intoxicated girl, because drugged, then it's like the action focuses on the action that he did, centering on their actions instead of her actions or how he or she was manipulated or trapped.
Yeah, so counteracting the narrative of where blame is being placed or who is sort of assigned cultural and social status as a result of the language being used. What have other folks seen as being effective in counteracting that narrative?
Hi. So what I found is I found that local media more recently has been advertising events centered around believing survivors or honoring survivors in some ways, and they've actually been really capitalizing on showing live footage of the event and interviewing whether it be a survivor who spoke at the event or maybe someone who works at like local RCC who helped create it. I think it's really powerful that the media seems to be starting to really highlight the voices of the survivors and the voices of people who are doing the work to make that change.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, elevating the voices of survivors. Allowing that voice to be the one that is projected most loudly, right? How
Definitely.
survivors take up space. So as we start to wrap up, I'm curious if anyone has any questions that I can help to answer around the Survivors Agenda work. Again, I will encourage all of you to go to survivorsagenda.org to take the survey. Before we close, I'll put my email up on the screen if you have any questions you want to send over email. But let me open it up now to any curiosities you have around the process that we're going through, around what this agenda is going to look like, around what we're hoping will come from it, anything.
So the Survivors Agenda, are you going to mail it to the federal or your local government area? Is it going to become like a bill, or maybe it's going to be like Obama's, I don't remember what it was called. It was like Obama's college letter or Dear Colleague letter. It was his idea on how sexual assault on college campuses should be addressed.
Thank you for that question. So it is a national agenda. And so in terms of legislation, it will be lifting up alternatives and solutions on the national level around legislation that currently exists, around legislation that we believe needs to exist. What we're hoping is that after the public release of the national agenda, that we can continue to be in partnership with folks that are interested in creating state-specific survivors agenda, of course, because so much of the legislation does take place around states and municipalities. So we're hoping that after we put out our national agenda, we can continue to work to sort of get more and more specific and work with different advocates and groups and states. And for this election cycle, I will say that I think it will be most effective regardless of who the new administration is. So looking at the first 100 days of 2021 to really use it as a tool to hold elected officials accountable and lay the groundwork for future conversations and movement building around what survivors are asking for, around building a constituency, a political constituency of survivors moving forward. Other folks have any questions? Okay. Well, again, I really can't thank you all enough for participating in this workshop. Everything that was shared today, both in your groups and in this main conversation, all of those notes will be transcribed and integrated into the creation of the Survivors Agenda. So I'm hoping if you join us for the Survivor Summit on September 24th through 26th, you will be able to see part of yourself represented in the platform that we put out into the world. So I'm just going to share a little more information on my screen so that you can get in touch. Let me just cue this up. Love to hear from you and would love to have you involved in the survey online as well. So let me just put this up here. So there's the website where you can take the survey. Again, registration actually opens tomorrow for our Survivor Summit at the end of September. And then if you have any questions or thoughts, there's my email, alicia@survivorsagenda.org. Would love to hear from you. Anything that came up today that you didn't get to share or any questions you have, please don't hesitate to be in touch. So thank you all again. Yeah, this is a hard time out in the world, and it is conversations like this that, at least for me, kind of help me continue to do the work, feel like none of us are alone in that. And I hope all of you stay safe and stay well. Thanks, folks. Take care.